Hi, everybody. As Shiva said, I'm Jeannie Blaustein, and it's a joy to really end Reimagine's week-long festival here with you at the end of an incredible day here at the JCC on End of Life resources. So thank you for having us all here today. Welcome to the Power of Creativity. This is our last event for Reimagine, which is a festival across the entire Bay Area, exploring death and celebrating life at 250 events that are ending with this one today. This is a community-driven initiative sparked by Reimagine, a new nonprofit that believes by facing death, we begin to live more fully. Your support in the form of your presence here today and any other events that any of you may have gone to, your participation, your feedback, and your donations, all of that makes this festival possible. So as a thank you, we at Reimagine have created the first ever End of Life Times for you, which has tons of resources also about thinking about living fully and dying well. They should be outside, and please pick one up on your way out. This is a newspaper designed to spotlight the work of our community and also to be an inspiring resource for you. Please take one, spend some time with it, and thank you for your interest and participation. You might have come here today in wonder, in preparation, in remembrance, or maybe in an effort just to live more fully. No matter your reason, Reimagine aims to help all the voices in our community to be heard. So we're going to start this panel by just a very quick opportunity to share with each other. And for just 30 seconds, I'd like to invite you to turn to somebody near you and answer the following question. Why are you here? Why does this matter to you? So start, and then I'm going to give you a signal when it's time for you to switch partners and just share again. Why are you here, and why does this matter to you? Okay, everybody, thank you so much for sharing with each other.
It's fun to answer.
Thank you so much. It's so important that we start to really have these conversations and listen to each other and get curious with each other. So thank you for bringing your own voices into this room. So before all of the 250 Reimagine events, let me just see, is there anyone here for whom this is your first Reimagine event? Awesome. Oh, welcome to Reimagine, people. You're getting it at the tail end, and that's great because we'll be back. So keep your eyes open. Before each of the events that have been going on for the last 10 days, we have read a short reading. And I'm going to invite you, if you wish, you may close your eyes. That's up to you as I read Reimagine's opening intention. Why are we here? It's a big question about life and about death. Perhaps we start a little smaller and first ask instead, why are we here in this place together right now? We're here to create a brave space. We're here to explore big questions with a shared spirit of curiosity, humility, and empathy. We're here in community. None of us is alone, and together we can help inspire one another, ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities to engage in meaningful conversations about living and dying well. We're here to reimagine end of life, to envision a world in which we are all able to reflect on why we're here, to prepare for a time when we won't be, and to live fully right up until the end. We're here. Thank you. So today we are going to be treated to three incredibly talented creative artists and thinking about how creativity really brings their visions, their heartache, their aspirations into the world. I'm so excited. What we're going to do is actually have a tiny taste. We could have an hour with each one of these women and still not be done. But we're going to have a tiny taste of their work today, each one. And then we're going to engage in a conversation and have time for your questions and comments as well. So I'm going to just jump right in and start with the introduction of our first artist. Mara Holt Skov is an educator, author, and curator specializing in historic and contemporary contexts of art, craft, and design. She's particularly interested in rising macro trends in design and visual culture, interdisciplinary teaching and learning, and design for human needs, especially health, wellness, and the end of life. Professor Skov considers it design the most interesting space to be working in today because it's influenced by so many other areas of society, psychology, sociology, science, economics, politics, among others. She believes that design is the art of our time, the creative response to human needs, from the most practical and essential to the most poetic and emotional. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mara. And there's a clicker right there. Yeah. Mara, you can use this mic. Or would you like to stand it? You want to keep it on the stand? Okay, great, perfect.
That works.
Yeah. Let me move this.
How's that? Is that good? Okay. And the clicker going forward. That is not it. Middle?
No, this one.
This one. Oh. Oh, here's me. Here's me. I'm going to talk about my work, but before I do, I want to mention that I'm coming off a wonderful Friday evening at CCA, California College of the Arts, where I teach, where I've been bringing Reimagine events to our campus since the very first time. Yay. So 3 in a row now, each one extremely different. And several of my colleagues presented our work, which explores death and the end of life in so many different ways. So I want to expand. I'm actually standing here representing them. So I want to acknowledge the work of textile artist Ann Wolfe, who for 5 years brought students to the Zen Hospice to sit with and make work for guest house residents. I want to acknowledge the work of metalsmith Nick Dong, whose Mend Smith project helps those who are moving through personal losses to heal by transforming their loved ones into jewelry and new designs that reflect their loss and embody their new life beyond that loss. I want to acknowledge the work of filmmaker Shyla Hamilton, whose studio, entitled Conjure, Sacred Arts of the African Diaspora, helps students learn how ritual practices of ancestor reverence can deepen their own creative practice. And finally, I want to acknowledge the work of writer Leslie Roberts, whose Ecopoiesis project offers ways for artists, architects, writers, and designers to address the endings we are all experiencing due to climate change. So you can see we had a lot of different topics that we addressed, thanks to my colleagues. We all do this work independently, but as we know, as we've learned through Reimagine, of course, when we bring it into a larger conversation with others, we expand our own inspiration, and we find the support we need to deal with the hard and good questions of death and life. I want to thank my colleagues for their inspiration and their support for my own work. And now I want to tell you about my own specific project. So I want to start, but with a warning. So my warning is, be careful what you promise your husband on his deathbed. Because one of the problems, well, it did become a problem, but it was a promise I made to my husband, Stephen, in August 2015 as he lay dying after 15 years of kidney dialysis and other complications. It took me 3.5 years to fulfill. But that extended time resulted in a project that went far beyond Stephen's initial vision, and because of that, it got richer and deeper and more meaningful. So I'm going to take you briefly through the creative process of making the book a meditation on the impermanence of things. You can see on the screen here. I will walk you through some of the steps that my collaborator, Johan Resmond, and I went through as we created this book together. So the story begins with Stephen and a trip he made to Monterey Bay in a VW Bug, that's it down there in the lower line, with his ex-girlfriend. So that was good that she's an ex-girlfriend. Like many industrial designers, Stephen was fascinated with industrial sites and machines at all stages of their lifespans. When he first came to California, he discovered these sand mining machines, some of the images you see here, and he took black and white and color photos of them. He always wanted to do something with them, but as it happens, life got in the way. And that life that got in the way, that's Stephen there teaching one of our classes that we taught together. It included working for a design consultancy, getting married to me, chairing the industrial design program at CCA where we both taught, becoming a father, curating design exhibitions, writing hundreds of essays for design essays for all kinds of publications. Stephen was many things, and the image you see at the top there, which is a spread in that book, Johan, our designer, created shows with radiating keywords that explain all the kinds of things that he was. But he was primarily a teacher of designers and also of life, I found, for generations of students. Now, what we do as teachers is to offer our ideas and insights to our students and encourage them to go out and create their own ideas and insights. We set them free. One of the students was this man on the right here, Johan Resmond, who also made a deathbed promise to Stephen to design the book that Stephen had envisioned so long ago. It started as a simple book of photos, but eventually it became equal parts photography, political and social commentary, natural history, poetry, artful design, and it was 100% about grappling with the impermanence of everything. Thus, it became our title, and that's me on the left. So we originally started with things that we gathered from what Stephen had done. It included Stephen's short texts and haikus, his photographs of the sand mining machines that I showed you, close-ups of rusting metal and weathered wood and his scars. We had blue sky thinking clouds that he used in his slide presentations to students. We had pictures of his scarred body taken by Bay Area photographer Glenn Matsumura. We had mysterious scans of his brain from the many MRIs he had. So our first steps were to think about how Stephen and I used to start any project that we worked on, which is to gather keywords and language, keywords and phrases that would help us define our topic. And so Johan and I did that, and we gathered all these keywords, and they became the titles of the book chapters. Encounter and Vision for the introduction, Structure Site about Monterey Bay and the sand mining that went on there, Decay and Entropy about what happens to man-made structures and human bodies as they age, and finally, Transform, Transcend about the impermanence of all of these things. Stephen wrote haikus. It was good because he always felt like crap, and so he thought, if I write really condensed poetry, that's what I can do. That's how I feel well enough to do. So those found a place in the book and gave us a visual pause and a place for Johan to bring in some of those full images that he had worked on. We also expanded beyond the photographs and took some of our own photos of sand and surf, and that's my son Larson, who flew us over the Monterey Bay so we could take photos of the coastal sand and the dunes and the currents and the waves and try to reveal in visual terms the impermanence we were addressing in the book. So I did archival research at the Monterey Public Library. My happy place is archives. And a classroom as well. I wrote a cultural and environmental history of Monterey Bay, and I introduced Stephen to our readers, and Johan created the graphic design system that made these stories beautiful. So in addition to being a talented graphic designer, Johan is also an artist and a musician, and we knew that the book had to have space for his exploration into a more artistic approach to the materials we started with, and develop his own visual language. So biology Gregory Bason's search for the pattern that connects was an essential way that Stephen thought about the world and continued to inspire him. And it guided Johan and me in our own creative process for the book and ultimately led to the lessons for designers that I'm going to show you here without comment. These are all from the book spreads. And I'm not sure if you can read it because it's kind of tiny, but it says every moment matters in that book spread. And this at the end is the greatest lesson of this work that we did, that every moment matters. It's a credo that Stephen and I began a relationship with, and it's something that we tried to live our lives by every day as his health declined over the 24 years that we were together. So the acceptance of impermanence as a condition for all life is really what this book is about. And in addition to Stephen's search for a new definition of beauty in the beaten up carcasses of these industrial structures, but also in a long-suffering body, which was his. As Johan and I came closer to completing the book, we really realized this, and we came to understand that one of the things that Stephen was looking for when he was taking photographs of these old rusted machines is that he was looking for some kind of acceptance of his body's own personal aging and decay, yeah? And trying to think of it as beautiful. Now they're both gone. The sand mining structures and Stephen too, after struggling so long, so many years to stay alive and make meaning through his life in design and writing and teaching, his connections to others and to the natural world. He's gone, but his energy and his inspiration have already been passed along to others to ripple and course into new territory. Life is short. We know this, especially those of us who are here today. We have this recognition. And for some of us, it's shorter than we want it to be. That was certainly the case for Stephen. But life is made up as moments of delight and moments of wonder and moments of uncertainty and moments of pain. And lots of it is really, really great. And lots of it is really, really horrible. But at the end, all of it matters. Every moment matters. Thank you.
Thank you.
I told you you were in for a treat. And it's not over yet. Maura, thank you. It was beautiful, beautiful work. Our second artist is Veronica de Jesus. Veronica is a visual artist, raised, as she says, in several American cities. She illustrates life as an American in all its varied splendor, drawing on pop culture, icons, sports, heroes and villains, and more. She draws our complex world into focus. Her memorial drawings and ongoing series of illustrations complemented with text honor the many people who have influenced our collective culture and reflect on loss and mourning. Her work also explores identity and the ways we hide and reveal elements of our personalities. Her work has been shown in galleries in San Francisco, Berkeley, LA, and Atlanta. She has a BFA from San Francisco Art Institute and an MFA from UC Berkeley. Please join me in welcoming Veronica.
Oh, this is on. Great. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with you all. I just wanted to start by saying that, I grew up with a dad that believed in prayer. So we actually prayed every day. And I'm showing this piece because it's like, I drew this piece as a vessel a while ago, but it makes me recognize that, growing up, we really did grow up with prayer, and we would just recognize people that were distant to us. And so that really has influenced my practice so much. And so growing up, my dad, in the 60s, he got into some trouble with the law, and he actually had to take on a new identity. And my mom, and it happened right here in the city in San Francisco in the 60s, and my mom came into the picture, and they kind of became a version of Bonnie and Clyde, and they had us kids along the way. So a lot of my work is about, fleeting from place to place, and just really, trusting in strangers and trusting in just life, and and I use my practice to just make connections, and I really think that that's what led me here today too. And then so a lot of my work is a reflection on how I grew up. So I have these series of card drawings, and growing up we would travel cross country, very often. I think I traveled cross country like 7 times, and we would just change cars along the way. Yeah. And my father, he was really into. He was a fanatic, and he was a Catholic, but also he practiced white magic as well. So I grew up with a lot of ritual and a lot of believing in the unknown. And then I just wanted to show a quick animation. Does that work? My dad's favorite hero is Batman. And I feel like growing up, I feel like my dad was like this everyday Batman character. And then how do I get back? Great. Yeah. And then also growing up, we really were from place to place. Like we lived in our car, we had furnished apartments. So consistency was really, I didn't have it. So recently I've been really thinking about all the department stores that I would go into, and that became like this kind of place that I really found a connection to. So I started doing these drawings based on the old Kmarts that I would enter, and maybe in Florida, maybe in New Orleans, maybe in Detroit, maybe in Pennsylvania, all the places that I existed. We were also by water. My father is Puerto Rican, so I'm half Puerto Rican, and he's full Puerto Rican. So he grew up surrounded by water, and I feel like that really has influenced my practice as well. To take a turn, so we were growing up, on the run. At 3 months old, my brother Ralph got a condition called hydrocephalus. So, which means that a water rushes to the brain and you stop breathing and you need immediate emergency assistance. So we were on the run, and we were also in and out of hospitals. We were also having a fake ID as well. So it was just a really interesting life. And then I just made a simple animation that just describes Hydrocephalus. And this is my brother and what he has endured. So we were, in and out of hospitals, always on the run, and that was our life. And then to zoom ahead, there was a point in our life where our family separated, so I didn't really know where my two younger brothers were or my mom for 24 years. And in 2000, I did two things. I filed a missing persons report through the Salvation Army, and I also applied to Berkeley for grad school. And in that same time frame, I got a call from my brother Abraham saying, "Hi, I think I'm your brother. My name is Abraham de Jesus Santana." And he had our fake name still, because they didn't really get the update that our case eventually got dismissed and we returned to our actual name. Another twist is I had just graduated from Berkeley, and I have all my family and I know where everyone's at. My brother kills his wife, Sandra, and it was devastating. And he left behind 3 beautiful children, and he's serving a life in prison here in California. And that was a really hard hit, But the beautiful thing about my art practice and what seems to lead me to being here today is I was working at Dog-Eared Books at the time, and I started creating these memorial drawings, and I would draw people that had just passed away. I'd make a copy of them, and I'd put it on the storefront in Dog-Eared Books. I don't know if you've been there, Dog-Eared Books 20th in Valencia, and there's all these drawings in the window, and that's my project. And that was the result of this terrible tragedy that our family endured. Sophia, Jonah, Evelyn, the 3 kids, they're all doing great. Sophia is a duck, and she's having her last year in the university. But this project came from that. And now I just kind of continue to use my practice to connect with community, connect with unknown, and just having continuing faith that my practice is leading me to where I need to be. Yeah, and then I think this is my last one. And then I've been recently making these animations as a way to process my practice, my thoughts. You can play it. Yeah, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm already feeling and noticing themes that are beginning to emerge across the 2 artists who've already presented. So as you're sitting here, I invite you also to begin to see what bubbles up for you as you're taking in these incredible expressions of your practice and your work. So our 3rd artist is Angelica Akechi. Angelica is a Los Angeles native, but moved to the Bay Area to complete her discipline, her work in photojournalism and women and gender studies from San Francisco State University. Her love for art, texture, beauty, and authentic storytelling play a significant role in her work. Her vision is to integrate documentary-style photography and film to create graceful visual art. She served as filmmaker and photographer for the Museum of the African Diaspora in downtown San Francisco. Many of the subjects in her work are people who are living on the outskirts of society. They are immigrants, minorities, natives, refugees, women, the poor, and victims of violence, just to name a few. So please join me in welcoming Angelica.
Thank you guys for having me, and really beautiful work for 2 ladies. It's really amazing. So my name is Angelica, and I'm a journalist by trade or practice, or whatever you want to call it, but I always say that I'm an artist who happens to be a journalist. And what I do, I'm a photographer, but what I am trying to push and what I want to be known for is a medium that I'm developing called visual symphonies. And they are a mix between documentary film and scores that are inspired by my reporting. And this came about through just a desire to always, even with my practice, even in training in undergrad, I almost dropped out of school because my professors would tell me that I would always be too artsy. But I knew that there was something in art that could actually touch the human heart. And I think that with journalism, like as a trade, we were always taught to be, to have this distance with our subjects, and to have this distance. And so for me, I couldn't connect with that. And I was like, something has to be done. And so in 2016, I had the opportunity to work with a nonprofit called City Hope. And they are a nonprofit that serves the Tenderloin. And the director hired some local artists, and they were like, if you guys could come in and potentially do some work that, will allow people to really understand these people that live in the Tenderloin that people often walk past. And so he linked me up with a woman who was in jail for 3 years for stealing Scott Wiener's cell phone. She didn't know he was Scott Wiener. She just stole his cell phone because she needed she needed to get high, and it was like, I'm just gonna steal this guy's cell phone. So she stole his cell phone, and he took her to a Wells Fargo and was like, fine, I'll get you money, come to the Wells Fargo. But he knew that there was a camera there that would get her. And so she was put in jail for 3 years, and he asked me, he's like, do you want to do a project with her? And I'm like, sure. So I asked her, I said, do you mind if I meet you? It was Father's Day, she was coming out of jail. Do you mind if I meet you and do a project with you? And she's like, sure. So I followed her story, and my thing was like, how can I get people to understand this woman's story, right? Like, they walk past her every day, and they're like, she's a drug addict, she chose that life. Sometimes we get like that and we judge. And so for me, I was like, you know what, I think I'm gonna write a score, and I'm gonna call it The 11th Day, and I'm gonna show this relationship, her relationship with drugs from a perspective of romance. And so the first line was like, you caught my eye on day one, right? And so like when you're falling in love, like you're oblivious to everything, you don't see the red flags, and you're just like taking it one step at a time. And so I was like, if I could get people to understand how abusive relationships begin, I could get people to understand how her relationship with drugs began, right? She just doesn't wake up one day and like, I want to be a drug addict. Like, that's just my life goal, Like, no one does that. And I think that if we can understand that, like, we can understand her story. So I told him, I'm like, I want to do this score and I want to do this film thing. I had no name for it. And I was like, I just want to do this thing. And they're like, are you sure, Angelica? This is just too out of the box. And I'm like, guys, just trust me. And so we performed it at the Great American Music Hall. And I remember being on stage and I was doing it, and like in the moment I was like, what am I doing? Like, like I was so afraid that the score wouldn't line up with the film, but it was all working. And I was seeing people in front of me just like crying, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is what I need to do with my life. Like, this is it. And so from there, I was like, how can I keep doing this thing? And I don't know if you guys know Ed Kashi, but he's a really famous photojournalist. And I looked up to him a lot, and I had the opportunity to meet him. So when I first met him, I was really nervous. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's Ed Kashi, like he's so cool, I'm not. And then I just had this thing over me, like he just has this familial vibe, like he can be my grandpa, like I'm just gonna go talk to him. So I'm like, Ed, I have this cool idea, I wanna do this thing, blah, 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 blah. So I'm explaining it to him, and he's like, these sound like visual symphonies. And I'm like, yes, that's it. And so I told him, I was like, can I have the name? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, great, I'm just gonna keep calling that from there and so, then on. So I just kept calling them visual symphonies, and it made so much sense. So I got so excited. And so when I perform them now, I have like a semi-silent documentary film, but the reporting is normal written reporting, like if any journalist would do, but I just reframe their words into music, and that's my way to connect people to the stories, right? Because I think that music is this universal language, and also film is this thing that we can connect to, right, and we can understand. So that's what I started doing, and I developed one for Reimagine like a year ago, Brad? A year ago, and I followed this mother that I had found. One of the things that I had a passion to do is to really discuss like disparity within death, which we don't often do, right? And talk about how particularly people of color and African Americans die, and through police brutality, which is a big deal. And so I created this film called The Removal, and the title had to do with asking the question, who gets to die? And when I talk about die, I talk about who gets to go through the death process, right? Who gets to have the opportunity to prepare for death? And who are those that are being prematurely removed from society? And so that's why I called it The Removal. And I followed this mother whose son had died by the West Oakland BART police. And that's what the score is called, Who Gets to Die Today? And the film's called The Removal. And so I performed it last year with 2 violinists and a pianist. And this year I was able to do it again at open night, and I added a choir. So, I mean, I hope to continue doing this with other stories that need bigger platforms, and other stories that we often get desensitized to that need this fresh breath of air. And so, yeah, so I have a small trailer from the film that I did, and
Ben's going to help us with the trailer.
yeah, he's going to help. It's only 2 minutes, but you guys get to hear the song and see some of the visuals.
We have to force their head after carrying a life for 9 months.
Who gets to die today?
And are you going to put Salim on the agenda?
This is a situation where he fired 3 shots into the back of a person who was on the ground.
Police have released the name of the man shot and killed by BART police officer.
My little brother was with his fiancée and his 2 children.
28-year-old Shalim Tyndall.
The only thing that threats people is the truth.
Justice, justice. You live a life, you live a life. Justice, you live a life. Justice, you live a life, you live a life. And they can take you, but your spirit lives. Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. So let's talk. I don't need that. I think we're good. You know, some of the themes that have come up in your art, I think very much are echoed in Reimagine End of Life, and some of them, it seems to me, are the ways in which we respond as human beings to loss, how we generate empathy in the face of anguish and rage, impermanence, and what it means to actually be human. And, you know, life itself, I think we could say, is a creative act. There's no blueprint for how we're going to live the rest of today, even. And what comes up and how we respond to it is really a function of our own creativity. And many of us will say, well, you know, I'm not an artist or I'm not a creative person. But in fact, every one of us has this energy and this capacity in us. And the 3 of you have really given spaciousness and honor to that in yourselves. And so I want to just thank you for that inspiration and reminding us that we have that ourselves. You know, art and creativity clearly are some of the strongest ways that we express who we are and how we're responding to what's around us. And I want to start with a question about creativity itself. So I'm curious, how is it each of you have spoken about things that have really, really pulled at your heart? How is it that you've responded to life's challenges in this way? Is this something that was always a part of you? Have you always sort of turned to this way of looking at the world and expressing what's happening for you on the inside, even as a child? I'm curious if maybe you'll just take a couple minutes and talk about kind of how you got to this moment in your lives. And I have a third mic, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in. When I reconnected with my mom after 24 years, she had kind of told me like how I was born, and that she actually got so tired of running from the law with my father, and you know, dealing with the fact that my brother had hydrocephalus, that she actually signed herself into the mental ward. And then I went to go live with strangers who I don't know who they are to this day, but I think that they took good care of me. But I think I grew up with that leap of faith, and I think that that has led me to where I'm sitting with you guys here today, and just I continuously am using that in my practice. Yeah, so that's one answer. Yeah.
And I think for me, I mean, I was doing another interview, and like sometimes I feel like we learn about ourselves as we're just talking, and we're like, wait, I did that because of that. And I think for me, music has always been something that I could hide into. And so even coming into an industry where I didn't feel like I belonged, music became this thing of like, I need to take it with me. But then it ended up working out for me, because it was like, well, people also need this as well. They need space to enter into stories, and they need space to relate with stories. And so music has been this thing for me where I've used it in my own life where I needed to express myself, and so now it was something that I could take into an industry with me that I felt like needed something fresh and new. So yeah, I think that's, for me, that's how it.
And I was an only child, latchkey kid, working mom, divorced parents, and so I had to entertain myself quite a bit. I probably didn't have to be as creative as you did, Veronica, but I did sort of have to do a lot of creating something out of nothing. And usually that resulted in my mother coming home and I had rearranged the furniture all by myself, which I still do to this day. I don't ever ask for help because I never learned how to, which is a problem, but that's for another conversation. My biggest joy in creating things really comes in, I'm a curator as well, and it comes in looking at what other people have done and sort of crafting a story, whether that's a visual experience of going to an exhibition or the evening we had last Friday at CCA was Reimagine, by pulling people together, pulling different people together. It's probably because I was an only child and I thought I just need to get people to come over and be around me. And that's where the creativity comes, because what it allows for is that whatever's in your head, and you can't do what you're doing by yourself either,
for sure,
either of you,
for
yeah.
sure.
But whatever's in your head, if you bounce it off of somebody else or many somebodies, it amplifies it, and it makes it so much more interesting, and that's why a lot of my most satisfying work comes in collaboration with people. So I look for other people who can make me better, and hopefully I offer the same to them as well, yeah. Oh, yes, you can have a mic.
So I wanted to ask you another question. Each of you has shared work here today on very intimate experiences, either in your own family or in the people who you've gotten to know, and the hope was to really create an intimate relationship with those people. But also the work is very anchored in sort of larger questions around the human experience and suffering beyond the individual. So I'm curious if you might talk just for a couple minutes about sort of how you think about that relationship between the very personal and the larger existential universal questions that I think each of you touch so beautifully in your work, and kind of how that plays for you. Are you thinking about both of those levels? Does it just come out? How does that resonate for you?
I'll just literally just jump in, because I'm thinking about when my brother Abe, who did this horrendous crime and took a life. I'm remembering probably a month before that happened, he actually called me on the phone on his birthday, and he was so happy, and he was like, "Oh, I just wanted to call people that I really care about," and then literally, I think a week later, my mom calls me and I tell my mom, "Don't call me at 6 o'clock in the morning, Mom, please let me sleep." And she was calling me to tell me that my brother just killed his wife. But I bring that up because that hard thing led me to my memorial drawings. Just because I was, I don't know, and then my memorial drawings became this thing that wasn't about me, and it was never about me, and I just kind of became, you say, you're the vessel, so I just was in service of others and in service of the community, and I still think that project is still doing its own thing, and it became bigger than,
Yeah, and I think for me, I feel like I'm still in the learning process. I think I was just talking to my mom the other day, and I was like, I think it's funny that you name me Angelica, and it means messenger, and that's what I'm doing, in every way. And for me, it's almost like I envision myself as this fisherman who's catching fishes and is trying to be able to filter out beauty from that, right? And so it's you're looking at pain, and each time, I feel each time I perform this, I'm I don't know how to explain it, but horrifically beautiful. And it really is what it is, right? And it's like, it's this desire to like be able to see beauty in every situation, and it's really difficult sometimes, but to be able to do that, I think that is refreshing and encouraging for the human soul to continue to go on. And as a journalist, it's like, we're not taught to do that. We're taught to spit out the news and that's it, right? But adding this other humanistic layer to it, I think that it allows us to connect on another level, and I think that's my desire. So, yeah.
I do want to say something about this idea of specificity, which I wasn't really trained as a writer, but I became one through lots of pain. But it was always encouraged to me, well, and actually my husband Stephen was my first editor, and I just remember sitting there going, don't hate it what I've written, please. And he would write everything, comments all over. And one of those comments that he always kept writing was, be specific. Like, quit speaking in generalizations, get to the specific thing, which is why when I showed the slide there of him taking pictures, I noted the VW bug, because that's specificity. And we all have some like relationship to that. But it's so interesting because what I find is that through that specificity, through the telling of a personal story that has all of its little details of a life, of, and the richness that I think both of your work is showing in this, like the really specific details that tell the story of a particular life and a particular death and the traumas that we go through individually. That's where it gets universal. I don't know if I have the words to describe it yet, but through that specificity, somehow the story becomes universal. Sure. And I think there's more work I need to do on that to figure out how to talk about that. But I do believe that there's this moment of like telling an individual story that because of the specifics of it, you see that person as an individual or that, animal or, whatever it is, the story you're telling. Yeah. And through that, you then are able to reach a larger audience, not necessarily by connecting with somebody like individuals saying, oh yeah, I drove a VW and I get that, or I knew somebody. Somehow it just makes us realize that everybody's story is completely different, and yet through that, we're all also living the same story somehow. So anyway, more work to be done on that. Yeah. Next year, I'll see if I can say something about that.
It's so funny because I purposely grew up, and through art school, I was so general, so vague. But later on in my practice, as soon as I got really specific, like with the details of how I grew up, because I kind of kept all of that kind of in shelter, because, it's a big story, and it's a lot to command. So I would stay hidden from it. But as soon as I started being specific, things just really you do really connect with people, and people really do need to hear it, and you don't really need to protect people, I don't know, but I'm learning too about this. Yeah.
I have so many more questions that I could ask you, but I want to make sure that we give time to folks in the room. If anyone has a question to ask either Mara, Angelica, or Veronica, I think there's a mic in the room, so if you raise your hand, the mic.
I'd like to
oh.
You can bring me, I don't need a mic.
Okay, go for it.
I want to say that the common factor for me in all three of your presentations is that you each had human, personal connections to everything that you presented. And as another human, I appreciate each of your sensitivities in producing a something. But that to me is a common thread that we as humans see and experience. And the thing that I want to say is appreciate that you, Miss Santana, no longer Santana, you appreciated the history of your family and your father and your brother, Angelica. This is a very, it's good that you used yourself and your talent in this way. Continue. And I have great regard and respect for your reliving your love affair.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Do you guys want to respond at all, or should we?
Right on.
Beautiful. I don't think I could have said it any better. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful way of threading all of your work together. Anybody else have comments? Yes, I see a hand over here.
This is going to video, so if we can use the mic, please.
Hi, thank you very much for your artwork. They're very beautiful in their own way. My question is, I'm a grief coach, so I use art as a way of healing. How did you all heal from your projects?
Good question.
Are we done healing? That's what I want to know.
Well, you can.
Like a project is finished, but the work might not ever be done in some way. It gets easier, I suppose. But
I mean, I feel like for me, I'm always in the process of healing, and it's true. Like my projects probably help, lily pad me to new growth levels, but I'm, it's a process.
Okay. And I think for me, it's sometimes difficult because most of the scores are written from the subject's perspective. And so I have to re-enter. Sometimes I want to say, it sounds weird, but you almost have to re-enter into the trauma so that you're able to give that out when you sing. I mean, I think the program was last Thursday, and I had a follow-up interview with the SF Chronicle, and the woman hugged me, and she's like, I feel like your spirit depleted. And I'm like, yeah, well, I had to give all that out again, right? Because I want them to understand the pain that she experienced and the vicarious trauma that I experienced working on that story. And so, I mean, I don't know, right? So if I keep getting invited to perform, it's like you're trying, like, I'm calling myself an immersive visual journalist. And when I was working on it, there was a time where I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore, because I actually entered into depression for about 2 weeks. But it was like, Angelica, first of all, if she's going through it and she's protesting and her son just died, you can do it. And then second of all, it's like, you can't call yourself an immersive visual journalist because you need to immerse yourself because you want to immerse others. And so it's like, I have to continue kind of doing the seesaw and then learning practical steps for me to be able to take care of myself in the process, right? And give myself space. And maybe, I feel like I'm still learning this thing, but that's really what it is for me.
I wonder if there's some way that you can, like, sort of ritualize the post-performance experience to allow for that sort of healing, and then have that be also part of the story. Because, I mean, you can't take on, I mean, I saw the performance. It was amazing and powerful, and I was in tears. And it's because of your beautiful work and because of the story that really needed to be told. But yeah, I'm thinking like, oh my God, that must be so much to take on and then to give out to the audience, that maybe that does become part of the post-performance experience that will allow you to continue to do it, because I don't think you should stop. Yeah. Don't stop.
Yeah. And it's also this thing too where it becomes healing for the family to see someone honor their son or their loved one in this way. So it's this thing where it's like, it's a give and take,
Your question makes me think about the fact that I think at least two of you referred to your work as a practice. And it seems to me that, we know that a practice is something which is ongoing and which takes on new meanings at different moments in our lives. But I wonder if that is also a way to think about the healing experience and the process that you're engaged in with your work. And I'm wondering if anybody has anything to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, just raw intuitively. I mean, I feel like how people are a mirror to ourselves, and I feel like part of my practice and process is just hearing feedback from others, and I feel like they become part of the healing process, like open engagement, like your question, becomes part of now my process and my practice, and thinking about, how I'm grieving. My work really is in service of others, and I kind of, I try to take care of myself, but it really is not about me. So it's a good reminder that, oh yeah, I'm grieving too, you know, yeah.
Anybody else? Last words?
We'll get to you, Dad, in a second. But I think for me, it's difficult to call minds a practice because I feel like I believe that I was made to do this, right? And I think it also goes into spirituality in the way that it works in our belief systems. So for me, it's like I feel like I was created to do this thing. And so sometimes the lines get blurry of where the boundaries stop and they start for me. So I think that I really appreciated what you said, Mara, about learning how to steward that. Because I'm one that I have an extreme personality. It's like I really, really like something, I really, really don't. Or if I do a project, I really put my heart into it. And then there's people around me that are more practical and they're like, okay, Angelica, do this and not that, right? And so I think that's just, it's about building a team in order for you to become sustainable and still keep the potency in the work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I'm mindful of the time. It's been a long day for those of you who've been here at the JCC, and it's been a long week for those of us reimaginers. But before we end, I want to first of all ask you to join me in thanking our three incredible panelists. And I want to take this opportunity as our final moment for Reimagine SF 2019 to introduce Brad Wolf, who's the founder and executive director. So please stand up. Thank you. And the rest of the Reimagine team who's here, Carrie, stand up, and Alana, and Dara. Anybody else on the team? And if you are an event, no, keep standing. If you're an event host, and Dawn Gross and anybody else in the room who's hosted an event, please stand. And I want to then just thank all of you here for being a part of celebrating life and exploring death. We at Reimagine believe strongly that as we face death, we begin to live more fully. So I invite all of you to stand. In the JCC, we can say to life, L'chaim. Thank you all for being here. Good night.